So today I'm talking with Maddie. We're going to be talking about Colosseum and the Eternal Hackathon, which is coming up. First time meeting Maddie, and I don't have a whole lot of experience in the hackathon space, but I know this is probably one of the most important catalysts for getting more people into Solana. So, welcome to the podcast, Matty. How are you?
Good, good. Yeah, good to meet you, Seb, and happy to share what we're doing at Colosseum.
Awesome. So, well, maybe just a little quick intro on who you are when you found Solana, what you did initially, how Colosseum was born, and maybe even like the most successful products that have gone through Colosseum.
Yeah. So I learned about, I guess, Solana coming from the Ethereum space in early 2020, and I joined the Solana Labs team. And right around when they went to mainnet beta, so right around when I launched, and yeah, we were looking for how to get developers and specifically actually like startup founders to build projects on the network, and that's kind of where the meme of like chewing glass kind of got started because it was so difficult for early developers and builders to build apps on the network. And so one of the ways that we did that though was through online hackathons. And so that's what we're doing with Colosseum. But that's kind of the program that I kicked off early on there. And this is how a majority of VC-backed startups in the ecosystem got their footing. And yeah, we've continued that on with Colosseum through running hackathons for the Solana Foundation and broader community, but also adding on an accelerator, and we raised a venture fund to invest in some of the top winners coming out of it. And so happy to chat about what we're doing with the hackathons, but also with sort of this new product and program we call Eternal. And so I'm sure we'll get into it.
Yeah, sure. Well, let me just bring up my screen just so people can see who you are, so they can follow you around the world. Maddie Tay and Colosseum. So, when was Colosseum actually started?
It was start. We launched it in Q1 of last year, so we've been around for about a year. And yeah, we've run two hackathons for the ecosystem since then, and two accelerator cohorts. So the first one was Renaissance, and then the next one was Radar. And so we have actually two more coming up. With the next one being Breakout in April. But we wanted to sort of come up with a way for people to submit projects to us and go through this sort of same hackathon competition at any point during the year. And so that's kind of where Eternal came from.
I love the idea because, like, there's a lot of ecosystems which are not pushing this, and sometimes I've heard that they don't deem it's like a good return on investment for whatever reason. But obviously, you need builders to build, and it's no longer like chewing glass. But I have no idea where you'd even start right now. But this obviously gives you the tools and can kind of put you into the right group chats or the right GitHub repos and whatnot. So if someone wanted to jump into this and start building something, uh, can you take us through how should they do this?
For sure. Yeah, so where you start is you have to just create a Coliseum builder account. So just simple email, password, and yeah, you can click get started, and then once you're in, you'll see basically there's a dashboard in the application, the platform, and that's where you'll see this new Eternal dashboard, which will basically have this stopwatch button or this like hourglass, and once you click start challenge, it'll just start a 28-day countdown basically on a development sprint. And so the idea here is that there's a lot of developers or founders in the ecosystem that maybe they have like an idea or they've been working on something for a while, and they just either want to put down a 4 week kind of focus time with their team or maybe their co-founder on bringing it to life. And we feel that this is like a really good way to do it. So they'll click the stopwatch, and then they just provide us a 1 minute update each week. And then at the end of the fourth week, they submit everything basically they have around what the product idea that they've been working on, which usually includes like a product presentation, a technical demo, and a GitHub repo, among some smaller details. And then our team will basically review it. along with a few other judges. So if you scroll down actually on that page, you'll kind of see who the judges are for the competition. And then we'll kind of determine who exactly one gets accepted into our accelerator and gets 250K in pre-seed funding. And then also we'll just do this Eternal Award, which is basically for the most innovative new product in the ecosystem that we'll award 2 times a year. So that's it in a nutshell.
Okay, so the best product gets $25,000 as like a grant.
Yeah, that's right. That's non-dilutive. And then we'll basically take teams as they come in. If we feel that they're a great startup, we'll respond within like 14 days of them submitting and let them know if they're accepted into our next accelerator cohort. And that involves every team that makes it into the accelerator cohort will get 250K in pre-seed funding. And so we feel just like it's a great way to get introduced to the ecosystem, get off on the best foot in the Solana ecosystem, and get the resources people need as early startup founders.
Nice. And so once someone signs up, like if they are coming from ETH land or if they've been playing on EVMs, how would they like get help to even start to learn, the right GitHubs to clone, or that we don't want to repeat of just chewing glass in the previous, 2020, 2021. So how would they get started?
Yeah, so when they click start challenge, the first thing we'll ask is just a few basic questions around on what they plan on building during the sprint. But then right after that, there's a list of basically resources from like the top sort of get started materials from like the Solana Foundation and other folks in the ecosystem like Helios who've been putting out really good content around how to build on Solana. And then some of our own resources that we've been sort of developing that we give out to folks in the hackathons, because a lot of people who participate in the hackathons are completely new to Solana and oftentimes crypto generally. And so we have a list of resources there. And then, yeah, I think that's usually kind of what people need to get started, at least as a new developer in the ecosystem.
Good, good. So, how many people have gone through? And obviously, Eternal's brand new, but how many people have even submitted for the previous 2 hackathons? Like, how many different teams or projects?
Yeah, so in last year, cumulatively across both hackathons, we received about 2,500 submissions, and there was about 15,000 people who registered for those hackathons. So a lot of those people teamed up in groups of 3 or 4 to submit those end products. So quite a few people, quite a few product submissions. And so far, just Eternal, we launched it a couple of days ago. We have over 100 people who have, I guess, kicked off this sort of development sprint. So we'll see how many get to the end in a couple of weeks. But yeah, it's just an ongoing thing. We kind of have this idea for this ongoing hackathon, right? Like we've been running these like 5-week time bound hackathons, which I think of it like really great for the ecosystem in terms of like, founders from like Jito and Camino, Drift, or Tensor, all these folks squads, they all started in the hackathons. And so we're just trying to figure out like how do we sort of unbundle what a hackathon is, which is basically like a focused developer sprint, and allow people to sort of initiate that at any time during the year. And so that's what we're trying to see with this sort of ongoing perpetual hackathon.
Sounds good. So, Eternal's now to, I guess, bridge this gap, and then it comes up again. Then it's eternal until it ever changes.
Right.
So, what would you say to someone that says maybe I should just hold out for hackathon number 1 this year in April? Like, if they work on something now and it doesn't get accepted, or it's
Yeah.
maybe it's just not good enough, can they still work on it and submit it in hackathon 1?
Yes, for sure. So if you can submit to both the Eternal kind of ongoing program as well as the individual hackathons. I would say that the thing to note there though is that for both Eternal and the hackathons, we just sort of evaluate what you've done during those like specific time periods. So when you initiated the sprint through that 4th week during Eternal, and then at the beginning of the hackathon to the end of the hackathon for the hackathon is sort of what we evaluate and what the judges evaluate. in terms of work. So you can't just take a break after Eternal, after submitting, and then just resubmit the same thing. You have to continue kind of development and ongoing work around the project.
Gotcha. So with these hackathons, this one here, you said it's going to go for 5 weeks or 4 weeks.
It's about 5 weeks. Yeah.
And so how does it work when someone starts, coding away? Because this is not my forte. They start coding away, they build something, but then how do you know if they don't submit it or whatever? But how do you know they've been working on that for 5 weeks and not they've been, working on it for like 3 months, and then they kind of start mass putting it into the GitHub?
Yeah, no, this is a great question. I think this is sort of like an ongoing thing we've been working on. So I think there's like a couple different ways to answer that question. One, there's just sort of like an honor code that, if you're caught basically just bulk dumping in stuff that you did a long time ago into like a single commit in your GitHub, that kind of raises a red flag in our systems that like, hey, maybe this person is not being truthful in terms of like what they're submitting. We should investigate further. So we often jump on a call with those folks and try to like dig in to see to kind of validate that. And if it come, and this has happened a few times where if we validate that they didn't really complete anything during the hackathon, they'll just be disqualified. So that's one thing. Second thing, I mean, there's like just a body of research or a body of sort of like previous projects that we can look to see like how much can actually even the top teams get done in that period of time. And so we kind of have a sense of like kind of like what's possible. So if it's outside of like by a long shot of what's possible, that will tell us like, okay, like maybe these folks are just dumping in, one commit at a single time, and they actually did this at a different period of time before the hackathon. So there's some ways that we can evaluate it, but honestly, like it is difficult. Like you can sort of try to game the system if you want, but I think at the end of the day, that's just kind of holding yourself back. Like it will become very clear through the interview process that we run, winners through and such that that you may have not presented your presentation in an honest way. So I think I think we've done a pretty good job of filtering that out, but it's an ongoing thing that we've been trying to figure out how to improve.
That's fine. I was just more curious, to be honest, because I wasn't sure of like how the rules kind of worked, as I have
Yeah.
very limited development skills, no development skills. Cool. So, what is the most successful, or some of the most successful dApps that have come through last year? Because obviously the early ones, Drift and Camino and Jito, they all came through this hackathon. But what about last year?
Last year, we invested in roughly 25 projects, and there's been a handful that a lot of those haven't actually even made it to mainnet. They're still sort of in development and probably will be launching in the next couple months. But the ones that you may have heard of, so the first grand prize winner in our first hackathon was OR, which is sort of like digital gold / Bitcoin on Solana. So that was one of the more popular ones that have continued on building and are making really good progress. Another project that we invested in is called MetaDAO, which is sort of a new take on governance for DAOs using this thing called Futarchy. And so that's also gotten some pretty good traction. And then there's a long list of other projects in the ecosystem. Torque is another for our first cohort. So these are some ones that have come through. But if you want to check out a lot of the winners, we have all the previous winners and folks in our cohort on our website. So happy to, yeah, if you're curious, you can always go into the platform, but you have to log in.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, I was more asking because you know, in the space, there's a lot of people that build stuff, and there's a lot of people that ping me and say, "Can you cover this? Can you cover this?" And I don't do sponsored content, so I have to like it. And sometimes I see someone's putting a whole lot of effort into something, but at the end of the day, I hate to be the person to have an opinion on this, and I don't try to stop them from building them, but I say like, I'm not sure if it has product market fit. Like it feels like it's going to be hard. I mean, you can even see Magic Eden are pivoting away from NFTs. They're still going to do NFTs. You can see that Tensor has pivoted away from NFTs. Like there is the meta, the narrative changes, and I guess my point is, I want to see for the success of someone building to have a viewpoint, in my opinion, which you'll have a better viewpoint than I will, that they're building for what people like. I guess this game to where the puck's going to be, not where it necessarily is right now, and they're going to go ahead and build something which people want as opposed to what necessarily they want to build, that they then have to try and create demand for. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you kind of broke up a little bit there, but I think I kind of got the gist of it. So you're saying like how should people think about building based on like how to meet demand in the future versus like what they may be personally interested in currently is sort of the question.
Yeah, exactly. Because someone's going to have a hobby on something, they think, okay, well, I would love to make a football fan thing, but then if
Yeah,
that doesn't have product market fit, then they spend thousands of hours on something, and when if they just tweaked it a little bit, they would have something that could work, and they're still creating and making something really really cool. Because at the end of the day, someone wants to create something, get it funded, and have it grow, right?
yeah. Well, oftentimes, interestingly enough, a lot of the best founders that we've worked with or in the past, and in our current cohort, are people who are solving sort of problems that they face personally. I think this is actually one issue that's prevalent in crypto is that people will try to trace narratives, even though if they're not like completely passionate about it long term, because building a startup is like a very long term journey. You have to sort of stick with it when things are down, up, and even sideways, right? And so you have to have a personal interest at a deep level in whatever you're building. And so I think a lot of the founders that we back through the hackathon are folks that are actually really interested in bringing this product to life, mostly for themselves. And it just turns out though that it's a problem that or an opportunity that they can latch onto, but many other people are like them, and other people kind of have a similar opinion about it because they themselves want it as well. And so I think figuring out like from there, if this is sort of a venture scale or a really big idea, is sort of where the rubber meets the road in terms of like whether this thing should be fundable or something that can be focused on long term. But there are some ideas where it's that perfect confluence about like what you're interested in and what's going to actually be super impactful for the ecosystem and as a business long term.
Okay, awesome. So, like, I mean, yeah, I get your point, but do you think there's any specific things that you think, like, in your day-to-day travel of the blockchain, have you ever, like, are there things you like, someone needs to fix this, or someone needs to fix this, or this, if someone made this step, this would be awesome. Anything to kind of maybe plant some seeds to see if there's an alignment with someone watching this?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I ran out of like really good ideas like in the first couple of hackathons, and then people opened it and I'm kind of out of ideas. But I think I'll say this, like there's some general categories of things that I would love to see people experiment more in. And so I think one of those categories is sort of using stable coins for cross-border payment or commerce generally in very specific corridors. I think a lot of the stablecoin products today have gone really broad around like, oh, we're going to build like Venmo or Cash App on the blockchain type thing. But what I think is really important is that you sort of focus on a very specific problem in a very specific region for a very specific group of people first and sort of expand out from there. So like how do you focus on like the sort of like the Bangladesh India remittance corridor, and your app is just completely focused on solving that particular payments channel first, and then sort of expanding from there. And so I think that's one area I would love to just see more kind of user-facing applications solving like cross-border payments in specific regions. Um, I would say another area that I find pretty interesting is DePIN, just as a category. And so obviously there's been some larger projects like Helium, Hive Mapper, and then some newer ones like IONet is sort of like leveraging like latent GPUs for AI startups and like connecting those marketplaces between basically the GPUs and data centers versus like all these startups that want to run inference on behalf of their users. So I think there's a lot of interesting stuff there in the world that is interesting. We backed a team, two teams actually in India that are kind of doing depins for energy. So one is called Decharge, and they're basically building like a depin for EV charging of electric vehicles. And so that was an interesting one that we've been wanting to see for a while. And then there's another where there's like obviously a lot of demand on the grid, especially in Southeast Asia, and there's not much electricity in a lot of places, and so they're sort of building a deepen network for like these rechargeable battery packs that you can kind of like push around and recharge in an energy efficient way. So yeah, very interested in like energy deepen related projects as well.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks for that. I'm pleased this is operating. Any kind of final words to the builders out there before they dive into find some co-founders, and then get amongst Eternal. Maybe even some advice on like how do you find the right co-founder in this kind of situation.
Yeah, yeah, that's really important. That's actually maybe the most important thing, even beyond maybe having a good idea initially, is finding a good co-founder because you can always pivot, right? Your idea, you can always pivot to something new, but finding like a really solid co-founder that you can sort of I guess I'll say like first of all, have a good working relationship and have good expectations on what that even means. And so like we find that a lot of co-founders need to have a conversation right up front, being like, hey, what's your expectation of like why you even want to do this startup in the first place? What's your expectation on like working on the weekends, your family obligations, and because it is like sort of a 24/7 365 endeavor being a startup founder. And so you want to make sure that your co-founder is kind of on the same wavelength as you on that front. Two, that they're sort of complementary to you in a couple ways. Like so oftentimes in our cohorts you have usually two technical co-founders, but one of them is a little bit more focused on the go-to-market and kind of business development of growing the application, while the other one sort of gravitates towards the technical stack and developing the product full time. And so I think having that complementary skill set is important. And then also just having a passion, right, for the sort of same vertical, I would say. So you don't need necessarily, want to have one founder who's like really dead set on like building in the gaming category because they've been working in a game studio for the past 5 years, and one wants to work in DeFi because they've been working in TradFi for the past 5 years, and they can't really find a common interest on product. I think is another thing that comes up. And so yeah, I think before you start Eternal, we recommend that you find someone to build it with. You can do it solo. That's completely fine if you want to go be a solo founder, but finding someone that you can rely on and that fills your skill set as like a co-founder is really important. So yeah, the one thing that I can provide as a resource there is that we do have about 30,000 developers and founders who are on the platform today that you can look up in the co-founder directory on our platform and start reaching out to see if there's a fit there. But like once you find someone that you maybe feel is a good potential, co-founder, Eternal or one of our hackathons is like a great testing period, right? Or test opportunity for that co-working relationship.
Awesome. Well, cool. I'm excited. I have
Yeah.
no idea what we're going to see this, for the rest of this cycle and then through the bear market or whatever.
Yeah.
But I do know Talk and I do know Or and I definitely know MetaDAO, and they are cool things for sure. So cool. Let them build, I guess. Let them build.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree. Well, thanks so much for having me on. And yeah, if someone wants to reach out to me about their product, you can find me at Maddie on Twitter. Or, just join the Eternal directly, colosseum.org/eternal.
Amazing. Thanks, Maddie. Cheers.
Awesome. Thanks.
Whoa. Yeah.